Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to export Dataverse tables and views into Excel documents in just seconds. This method uses a hidden ExportToExcel API hidden in the backend of Dynamics and Dataverse, which is much faster than using Office scripts and Graph API to create your exports. So for this example, I've created a table called Table, and I've loaded in 40,000 records and 30 fields. The first step is we need to create a view, because we're going to be exporting based on the designs of the views. So we'll click on views and you can go and update any of these. I'm usually going to go to the active one. And then what we can do here is go and add in all the different fields that we want to have exported in our view. Okay, I've just spent a bit of time creating my view. So I've loaded in all 30 of my fields and I've put them in order because that's the order that they'll also be exported as. So we'll go ahead and now save as, and don't need to change any of those details, but we'll just click save. And we also want to publish. Okay, done. Now, the next step is that we're going to create a dummy model-driven app so that we can add the view into the app, and then we can go and access the ExportToExcel API function. So we'll go back. Go to apps, start with page design. The view and form will work well for this. It doesn't matter what the name is going to be. Okay, looks like it's starting to slowly load in. Now, which table do we want to base this off? Off of our table called table. And we want to access the view that we just created. So that's actually the default one, but then this was the one that I created. So we'll select that and we can see that the view looks exactly like the view we created before in the table settings. Perfect. So up the top here in the dots, we can see that there's an ExportToExcel function. So if I call that, it will start obviously exporting the file, but we want to know what's actually happening in the back end of that. So let's open up Inspect. Go to Network, click on it, and we can see in the logs here, there's an ExportToExcel function. Now, what we can see is this is the exact API call that the browser is making to Dynamics or the Data API to export the file. So what we want to do is recreate that and make this call, but from our Cloudflow. So the key bits of information to copy from here is the authority, because we're going to need that when we create the connection. The method, which is a post, and the path. We don't need to worry about the bearer token because that's all handled by the connector for us. But if you were just using the base HTTP connector, then you would need to pass in a bearer token. And the other important bit is the payload. So really what it's doing is it's sending in the information about the view. So what fields do we actually need to export? And so here it lists the view, which is going to be our active tables view. The fetch XML is what fields from the Dataverse table are we getting the data from? And the layout XML is then what is the output design going to be in our Excel document? So what field names, the column widths, for example, in an Excel document. Now, all of this is already created for us. We don't really want to touch this too much. So we're just going to right click and copy that object. All right, next we're going to go into our Cloudflow, and this one's going to be pretty basic. So we're going to add our Entra ID connector, which I'm going to go with the pre-authorized one for now. And so I've already got a connection set up, but if you're doing this for the first time, it'll ask you for some of these connection details. And in the URI and the URL fields, you just put in your org URL that you got from here, which is going to be in the authority field from over here. And the name of the connection doesn't matter at all. So then it's going to ask us for the rest of the details. So it's going to be a post method. And then our path is this, which is the ExportToExcel API. And then any of the headers that we've got, which is accept application JSON. Okay, and the body of the request, which is the view. So we're just going to copy the entire object and paste that one in there. Okay, that's that's that bit done. I'm just going to rename this action. I'm going to call it export to Excel. Excellent. Now, the output of this action is just a base 64 Excel file. So it's already formatted, already ready to go. Really, all we need to do is then create a file with that content. So I'm going to add a file to OneDrive. OneDrive. Of course, it doesn't show up. Create file. And I'm going to put that in my export to Excel folder. I'm going to call it Matt Test and make sure to put the file type in. So it'll be XLSX, and the file content is just going to be the output from the action before, but it's going to be base 64 to binary with the outputs of the previous action. And the body. And the Excel file. Alrighty, let's run our flow. Okay, our flow has finished running. So the export only took 27 seconds to export all 40,000 rows, 30 fields. And then it took 3 seconds to create that file in our OneDrive. So let's go and check that one out now. There it is. Let's open that. There we go. It's got all the information down to 40,000 rows. Now, there is one thing that you might notice, which is a little bit of a quirk, and it depends, I guess, how much of an impact it'll be for you, is that the information starts from column D. So there are some hidden metadata fields that kind of sit inside here in columns A, B, and C. There we go. Just got them to open. So they've kind of got these do not modify kind of table checksums and dates, which, to be honest, we don't really need. That wasn't part of the view that I wanted, and the API will always include them anyway. If it's really important that you remove these, I would recommend using just an Excel's Office script to go and remove columns A, B, and C every time you create an output, and then you've got a cleaned output. So going back to this Export to Excel API, what are the limitations? I guess there's a couple, and you need to know about them because it may or may not impact you with the amount of volume that you've got. The first limitation is that it will only export 100,000 rows by default. Now, this value can be overridden up to 1 million. You just need to import an additional solution that lets you override some of the organization settings that you've got. So that's not too difficult, and I'll put a link in the description for that one. The second limitation you're going to have is the fact that this is a synchronous API, and all API actions will time out after 2 minutes in Cloudflows, no matter what. You can't change the timeout limit on these actions by going into the settings. By increasing this to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it doesn't change anything. And it's a synchronous API, meaning that once it makes the call, it's always keeping that connection kind of waiting for the response. And if your files get too big, then they're obviously going to time out. So 40,000 rows worked in 27 seconds, and that's with 30 fields. So you can imagine we'd be able to get up to about 160,000 rows before this starts timing out. If your table is going to be even bigger than that, and you're going to need even more like processing time to export it, you're going to have to get creative with your solution, and you're probably going to need an Azure Function app. So what this would mean is that instead of the Cloudflow making this call, the Function app will make that call instead, since they don't time out after 2 minutes. And from our Cloudflow, we will trigger the Function app and then continually poll the app or wherever the app is going to output the file to until it's created. So for example, we trigger the app, and in the function app, we've programmed it to go and save into a SharePoint location. So now Cloudflow, we've just triggered it, and then we go and check the SharePoint on a 30-second polling frequency to go and check that the file has been created. If you found this video helpful, give it a like. Cheers.